Hello, in this section, I will talk about pediatric patients. We'll talk about the pediatric anatomy, physiology, we'll talk about pediatric pharmacology, how it is different from adult. We'll talk about how to, do a pre-op examination of a pediatric patient, what are the differences from adult patient that we have to consider. Then we need to know how to prepare an operation theater for pediatric patient, what are the different techniques of their induction, what are the things we need to be more careful during management of these patients, the complications which we can have. And then we will discuss one by one few important pediatric cases which can be posted for surgery, which we will face for anesthetic management during surgeries, right? So let us start with pediatric anatomy and physiology. Now you must have heard so many people saying that pediatric patients are not small adult. Well, I would start saying the same thing, that do not consider them as a small adult. They are too much different from an adult patient in both their anatomical features and also in the systemic physiology. And we need to have a proper knowledge to manage these patients successfully without having any perioperative complication. So what exactly relevant things which we need to know in pediatric anatomy and physiology? Well, we need to know that pediatric patients airway, how it is different from adult airway, and what makes the pediatric airway more difficult, and what are the things which we do to manage the airway, right, of pediatric patients. Then we have to know some important difference in the physiology of different systems like cardiovascular, respiratory. So we need to know in pediatric patient about difference in their airway anatomy, right? Then we need to know important features of physiology of cardiovascular system, respiratory system, hepatic system, renal system, their temperature regulation, and definitely some psychological things that we need to know about their management. And then we have to know the association of some important syndromes, congenital syndromes, which make their management difficult, and we need to know what difficulty those syndrome will present in the pediatric patient. So, syndrome associated which makes management challenging in these patients. So these are the important things that we have to focus on. So let us start with the first important thing, difference in the airway anatomy. How is the anatomy of airway of a pediatric patient different from adult? So in a tabular form, we will go one after another, right from starting with head. So if you have seen a child, you must have noticed that they have a big occiput. They have a big brain and they have a big occiput. And because of this big occiput, their neck is, neck is naturally in a flexed position, right? So they have a large occiput, and this large occiput naturally positions their head in a flexed position. So if you see this image, first image, since they have a large occiput, they keep their neck in position, so keep their head in flexed position. So this causes an obstruction. And to relieve this obstruction, this is more commonly seen in less than 2 years of age, less than 2 years. Okay, so if we keep a shoulder roll, right, just a roll of cloth between the two shoulder blade, right, then this natural flexion will become diminished. The shoulder roll below the shoulder will bring the head in neutral position. Okay, and another important thing which you need to know about their head is your nose. They're obligate nose breathers, right? So a lot of surgeries in which there would be a blockage of the nose, we need to know how to manage them, because since they're obligate nose breather, if their nose is blocked, they will definitely would be a lot of distress in the patient's post-op, right? Okay, then what is the difference in their neck, anatomical difference in their neck? Or let's first talk about mouth. Okay, so after head, mouth. Now they have a large tongue mouth volume ratio, right? They have a big tongue. If you open their oral cavity, they have a big tongue, and it occupies a, let's say, larger area of their oral cavity. This large tongue and mouth ratio makes the mask ventilation and laryngoscopy both difficult. In laryngoscopy, we have to push the tongue away. The two things we have to do in laryngoscopy, we have to push the tongue away, and we have to, let's say, lift the structure which is hiding the glottic opening. So since they have a large tongue, it is very difficult to push it away. So laryngoscopy is difficult. Since they have a large tongue, ventilation can also sometimes become difficult. So difficult laryngoscopy. And they have a small mandible. The mandible is small. So since the mandible is small, number of times the mask fit is not very good in these patients. So small mandible and edentulous, these two features makes the mask ventilation difficult. So there is an increased incidence of airway obstruction, and there is increased need for jaw thrust. You know, in pediatric patient compared to adult, we would need to give more often jaw thrust, right? Jaw thrust would lift their tongue and prevent it from obstructing their airway. Then they have, especially in the school-going age, they have prominent adenoid and tonsillar hypertrophy or adenoid hypertrophy you will see. And this makes it difficult. I mean, we should know about the condition of their adenoid because nasal instrumentation should be avoided in these patients, right? So nasal instrumentation should be avoided, and this large adenoid and tonsil again makes the mask ventilation difficult, and to some extent even laryngoscopy difficult by decreasing the space of the oral cavity. Then they have a short hypopharynx. The hypopharynx is also short. So placement of the supraglottic airway device is little difficult in these patients, right? See, supraglottic airway device has to rest, the tip has to rest in hypopharynx. So if they have a short hypopharynx, they can fold. So it is little difficult than adult in placing the supraglottic airway device in pediatric patient. Okay. Now, since they have a large tongue, and even I'll talk in just a moment about their epiglottis, which is also larger, and their soft palate is also a little more mobile, this makes them a very good candidate for laryngomalacia. Now what happens, the supraglottic structures, they hang over the glottic opening and cause an obstruction. So laryngomalacia is very common, Why does this laryngomalacia happens? Because of obstruction caused by supraglottic structures like your tongue, your uvula, your epiglottis, all these can cause obstruction over the glottic opening. So how number of times like the neonate, they are born, they have laryngomalacia, and gradually with age it improves. So when this obstruction is caused by the supraglottic structure, how would we manage? Simple. We just have to give a CPAP. We have to mask ventilate the patient. I mean, we just have to keep a good mask seal and produce a positive airway pressure. So management would be continuous positive airway pressure. Continuous positive airway pressure. The continuous positive airway pressure, that is CPAP. CPAP produces a very good positive pressure throughout the airway and keeps these structures taut and prevent it from causing the obstruction. So management is continuous positive airway pressure with mask. Okay, and gradually this laryngomalacia improves over the age. Okay, now let us see about their neck. What is the difference in their neck? Now their larynx is more cephalad. Adult, the larynx lies opposite C6 vertebra, and in pediatrics, in infant it is against C3, C4, and in children it is against C5. So since the larynx is more anterior, it is difficult to do laryngoscopy. So what should we do for a proper visualization of the glottic opening when the larynx is, let's say, anterior or cephalad? We need to practice burp more often in these patients. What is burp? Backward, upward, rightward pressure on the larynx, right? So if thyroid cartilage, I should say, thyroid forms the anterior boundary of the larynx. So if you give a backward, upward and rightward pressure, right? So the chances of visualization of the glottic opening improves in these patients, right? So we need to practice the burp maneuver. Now epiglottis is omega shaped. It is broad and longer. Since epiglottis is omega shaped, broad and longer, lifting the araepiglottic fold would not do the job of getting the visualization of the glottic opening. So in pediatrics, see, we all know that glottic opening, just above the glottic opening hangs the epiglottis, and we need to lift this epiglottis, then only we can visualize the glottic opening. So when we lift the araepiglottic fold, then the epiglottis gets lifted up and the glottic opening is visualized. We do that in adult. But in pediatric, if you are lifting the araepiglottic fold, the epiglottis gets lifted, but the lift is not enough for, let's say, visualization of the glottic opening. So since it is longer and broader, though it gets lifted up, still we are not able to see the glottic opening. So we need to lift up the entire epiglottis instead of lifting the araepiglottic fold in pediatric. That would be more helpful. So lifting the whole epiglottis, more helpful blade would be straight blade, though we can lift it with even the curved blade, and it depends upon the practice of the person, and laryngoscope the person, the anesthesiologist is more comfortable with. So epiglottis is omega shaped and long, difficult with curved blade, so Miller blade is used. Miller is your straight blade laryngoscope, straight blade laryngoscope. Now their arytenoid, this vocal cord is slant caudally, it is slanted caudally, and at their insertion in the arytenoid. So when we are doing laryngoscopy to visualize the vocal cord, there is a huge chance of arytenoid getting traumatized, right? Trauma to the arytenoid. So trauma to the arytenoid is quite common, and it can cause bleeding and swelling of the arytenoid, and again it can cause obstruction later on. Then glottis, well, previously it was thought that your cricoid is the narrowest part in pediatric airway and it is funnel shaped, and adult airway glottic opening is the narrowest part and it is cylindrical. So it was thought that pediatric have funnel shaped and the cricoid is the narrowest part, and adult it is more of the cylindrical shape of the airway and the glottic opening is the narrowest part. But this has been challenged with a lot of anatomical study done, and now it is in pediatric glottis is the narrowest part, though cricoid, this cricoid is the functionally narrowed part, because cricoid is formed by the cricoid cartilage. It's a ring shaped cartilage and it cannot expand. That is the part of the airway which is non-expandable. So functionally it is the narrowest part. So glottis is narrowest, though cricoid is functionally narrowest as it is a complete ring and it is non-distensible. It would not distend. And number of times if trauma happens to the cricoid, then since it will not distend, that would cause obstruction more. Right? More would be the risk of obstruction. A little trauma would increase the airway resistance to a great extent because of the decrease in the radius and the diameter of the airway. Okay, so since cricoid is functionally narrowest part of the airway, now straight your uncuffed tube is used to be historically more preferred in pediatric patients. Nowadays, again, this is challenged that should we use uncuffed tube or we should use cuffed tube. But still, a lot of centers are still using uncuffed tube in pediatric just to avoid any trauma to the glottic opening. So, uncuffed tube, they have a, let's say, they don't have a cuff and they have a uniform diameter and they have a circular diameter. And since they have a circular diameter, they do not cause any trauma on the cricoid. Okay, so small edema otherwise can cause a significant narrowing of the lumen. So uncuffed tube was historically considered better, and still a lot of centers use uncuffed tube in pediatric. The reason that they don't want to have any injury on the cricoid because it is functionally narrowest and it cannot distend. Okay, now let's come on the tracheobronchial tree. So trachea of the pediatric patients are of smaller length compared to adult. Adult, the trachea is 14 centimeter. Pediatrics, let's say it's